A cooperative business model could change your magazine game. Seán Wood from Positive News tells us how in Making Money from Magazines. So today I'm here with Seán Wood, who is the CEO, publisher, all-round head honcho of Positive News. Hi Seán, nice to see you.
Hi Nikki, great to be chatting with you.
So today we're going to talk about how a cooperative publishing model changed the game for you. So do you want to tell me a little bit about that, how Positive News is run and how you got started? Give me a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, sure. So Positive News, as you might guess from the name, is an online and print media organisation that's focused on reporting on what's going right in the world. So our kind of solution-focused approach with our journalism is at the heart of what we do. And we've been on an interesting journey over the past 10 years or so. And as you mentioned, a key part of that is our cooperative business model. So back in 2015, the founder of Positive News passed stewardship of the organisation to me. And in looking at how to take it forward, I recognised that what was of most value at that point, when it was then quite a small grassroots organisation, was this amazing concept that it had to focus on what's going right and do quality, engaging journalism, but about the other side of the coin to where the rest of the media is focusing. So that journalistic approach, but also it had this amazing kind of grassroots community of support. So back in the day, it was a free newspaper that was given out at events and in cafes and places like that. So very old school on newsprint. But there was a small number of subscribers who actually, even though it was free, would pay to get copies of this posted to them and would, in fact, cover the cost of postage to get kind of bundles of the newspaper, which they would then go out and distribute. So we had this kind of little army of reader distributors. So this kind of passion that was there in small numbers then, but really kind of deep passion for the purpose of what Positive News was doing, I kind of recognised was its biggest asset. I thought, how can we take this value of this kind of these super fans that it had and this social mission to create this inspiring, uplifting journalism that's going to benefit society and bring that into an effective business model? And the answer was to hand ownership of the organisation to the readers. So we set up a cooperative and sold shares in that cooperative. So these are what we call community shares. So anybody who invests has an equal vote on any matters put to them, no matter how much they invest. So it's this model that's democratic, really. It's built in that it has to work in the interest of its audience, its community, and in the public interest. And then, so it grew from there.
I'd forgotten about the newspaper format. That's when I first discovered it as well. I think my mum sent me a copy, always trying to get some happiness into my life, bless her. And I loved it in that format too. That's cool. I didn't know the distribution model was just basically people who were passionate about it. Just were they doing it, for free? Were they doing it as a favour kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. They would just order copies. And at that time, the whole print run was actually delivered to the office in this converted barn on a farm out in the sticks. And this whole print run of these newspapers, because there was quite a high volume printed, would arrive off this lorry and be shoved into one end of the office in a massive wall of newspapers. And there was a member of staff who'd kind of wrap them all up in brown paper and post them out to individuals around the UK who would then take them to their local cafes and festivals and events and things like that, workplaces. So it's this kind of grassroots marketing effort, the kind of antithesis of, digital marketing these days. It was all kind of people on the ground, and it all spread through word of mouth. So that was kind of this very strong foundation for it that we then wanted to build upon as, to create a sustainable business.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that cooperative model has its drawbacks, difficulties, but I'm sure that it has a lot of upsides as well. What do you think it's done for the magazine? What do you think it's brought to it, both financially and, from a reputational value?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So we did the community share offer in 2015. and we raised £250,000 in about 30 days. So we did it through crowdfunding.
That's amazing.
Which, yeah, for us at that point, with the tiny size of the organisation, that was a large amount of money, and it was a massive milestone. It's small change in the world of investment in media companies, but what it did is it gave us the working capital for a 5-year runway to develop and act on a business plan to get ourselves sustainable, which we managed to achieve. So first of all, it gave us this capital that we needed, to invest in the team and developing the product and the brand. So a year later in 2016, we relaunched. We turned the print publication into a beautiful quarterly magazine that went into retail, and so then we started building paid subscriptions and retail as a kind of key income streams. So as well as the capital, what it also gave us is this kind of this even deeper level of community support. And we ran, a big, thankfully really effective marketing campaign around the share offer, which then beyond the kind of we had about 3,000 subscribers to the newspaper to start with. So beyond those kind of super fans, we then brought, we got a lot of new attention. We brought new people on board. So that really helped kind of from a marketing point of view, kick off a kind of refreshed brand that then kind of relaunched in 2016. And helped establish a new story about positive news. So that ownership model, what it did was, as well as the kind of the financial benefit, it created this closeness of relationship to a key audience that helped then create a foundation for the community-supported revenue model that we have now, with most of our income being reader revenue. So that was really valuable.
We'll come on to reader revenue in a little bit, but I just wanted to ask you before we move away from the cooperative model, is there anything that you would have done differently looking back, or would you think, it sounds like it was a really successful campaign, but is there anything that you think you could have, any headache you could have removed if you'd known that, if you'd done it before kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was kind of right that we were, because we hadn't done it before, and we were, I think, overly cautious about how much involvement people would want and how much we'd have to deliver. Because as it turned out, people were kind of like, we love your mission, we love your journalism, go and do more of it and keep doing it, is the kind of message we eventually got. And, we came to realize that I think people don't want to do anything that feels like more work. Same for me. If I'm getting involved in things, I think that's the common kind of feeling in people's increasingly busy lives. So, to start with, after we relaunched, we refreshed the brand, we built a new website, we created the new print magazine. That was a huge amount of work. But then we were also trying to, we ran events. We did some big events for 1,500 co-owners who'd invested from around the world. And we got people together, which was fantastic. And, those events went really well. And we were doing magazine launch events. And we kind of thought, because we're a cooperative, because we're owned by all these readers, we really have to, we wanted to kind of deliver on that responsibility. But we over-delivered, and that cost quite a lot of time, focus, money to do those things.
Can I just ask you about that event that you ran? That's quite interesting to me. Presumably all 1,500 people didn't turn up to that. How many people did you have come, and what was the cost of running an event like that? Did you make any money from it? Was there like any kind of revenue model, or was it kind of just welcome and thank you to your people who had supported you?
No, it was more the latter. So initially, the first couple of years after relaunching, we ran some larger events, what we called our annual inspiration meeting. So it's like an annual meeting that a cooperative has to have for its shareholders, but we wanted to make it more uplifting. So hence, the annual inspiration meeting, or AIM for short. Nice. And they were kind of events in central London. We ran one in Bristol one year as well. That was where we got, I think it was maybe 100, 200 people. So it was mainly for, obviously geographically, it was people in the UK focused in the south. So it wasn't entirely accessible. But we'd have panelists, presentations from myself and others in the team, and workshops as well, which were the most exciting bit, really, because that was the opportunity for our co-owners to get involved with their ideas and feedback and help shape what we do next. But that, the challenge there is obviously a limited amount of people could come, but it also generated quite a lot of information and ideas, and kind of managing all that's obviously quite a task. And I think that plays into a bigger learning that we developed in the initial years around the need to really focus and slim down what we're doing to create that sustainable business model, and to actually have to kind of have some quite firm boundaries around what we engage with our co-owners about, and what we don't. But we found that they were supportive of that, because, as I said, at the end of the day, they wanted us to use our expertise to get the best result.
Yeah, I know how you feel, right? That kind of, being bombarded from all sides with, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And you're like, yeah, okay, that would be, and you want to do everything, right? But you've got to focus on what you do well, basically, haven't you? Let's just talk a little bit about how you've diversified your revenue since then. Do you want to talk a little bit about newsstand sales first?
Yeah, so newsstand sales, initially we gave that more attention. We got the magazine initially into independents, first of all. We felt that was kind of the lowest hanging fruit. And indeed, we have consistent good sales through independents. And interestingly, through the pandemic, while, all the retail chains completely dropped off, as happened for, all kind of consumer magazines, with WH Smith closed and so on. A lot of the independents kept going, and a lot of them were actually selling our magazine through their websites as well. So much smaller numbers, but really consistent. And again, it's like the customers for the independent shops, the type of audience who tend to be really passionate about our magazine. So, we got into some Sainsbury's stores and Waitrose, and we targeted WH Smith primarily. Our best kind of newsstand sales are through their travel stores, train stations and airports. And we targeted some kind of paid placement and free distribution through other locations. But we realized, first of all, I just really dislike the whole retail model, and the tiny portion of the margin that's given to the people who put all the work and effort into creating all the value. And the fact you have to pay up front to even have a presence in so many of the retailers. I just think it's all very unethical. That was one factor, but also, there's huge wastage, and they don't do any marketing for you. There's not a lot of care for, I believe there could be more of a mutual partnership to try and make the most of a great product and sell it. But that's not the way it works, obviously. And also sales were slow without big budgets to put into promotion in newsstands. So we took a very conscious decision to maintain newsstand mostly as a marketing effort, to have a presence there, but to really focus on selling direct to our audience, which is central to most of what we do. So we focused on paid subscriptions sold through our own website. And that's where the bulk of our print sales come from.
Yeah, I've heard of a few different organisations doing the same. Delayed gratification, I think, is probably the best example, where they say that the newsstand is just a marketing tool for them, and so they try. That's one of the reasons they use a lot of infographics, because they want it to be, very easy to see quickly what how beautiful it is, kind of thing. So yeah, I completely understand that mentality. It's hard, huh? It's hard trying to shift things on the newsstand when that's where the natural footfall and eyeballs will come from, but still it's so much money involved. That's
a key issue, I think, for small media businesses and when we come up against this again, it's about capitalization, and can you get the funds to give you that step forward. And when we relaunched, the capital that we raised enabled us to do a whole load of new things, and we're still benefiting from that capital raise in terms of the position it's put us in. And that's of course something that you can't do all the time, and it's something you have to do very carefully to get the right level of money from the right sources, because there's a trade-off. And obviously with typical investment, you're looking at then being tied to generating a certain amount of return for very, profit-driven investors, and there's compromises there. So in independent media, where, a lot of us are trying essentially to work in the public interest, and where, as we all know, it's a very difficult industry to make money in, because people largely expect our product to be free at the point of consumption. That's quite tricky. But yeah, if you have the funds, it can give you such a head start. Obviously, if you can pay to get the visibility on the newsstand, then you can build momentum from there with retail sales, as long as you've got a good product.
Definitely. Have you considered rerunning the cooperative model again, going back and not necessarily asking your previous owners, but to, ask for a whole new set of owners? Or how does that work? Are you allowed to do that? Would you need to have the permission presumably of the current owners, or how would that work?
Yeah, we would go back to the current co-owners if we wanted to do another share offer. But yeah, we can do that. And it's something that's always kind of under our consideration. And we've been, since we relaunched, our primary goal was to get the business financially sustainable whilst growing our impact, which we did. And then we've been kind of tweaking the business model and trying to grow profitability. But there's always a question of, when will we need more capital? When have we reached kind of the ceiling of what we can do with our current resources before we need another injection to be able to ramp things up? And that's a question we're kind of looking at regularly at the moment.
Maybe it's something to fall back on if you suddenly need a large injection of money for some reason. I heard of another publisher who ran an auction recently, who wanted to invest in their website but needed upfront costs for that, and knew that it would be fine longer term, money wise, but they just couldn't gather the whatever it was, 200 grand or something, that they needed to be able to do that now. So maybe it's something to think about for that.
Yeah, definitely. And we do think about it in terms of, more kind of project funding. But we're also at the moment looking at the potential for more grant funding for certain projects. So with each approach, there's different circumstances and trade-offs to make. So if we were to raise more capital from our audiences, another community share offer, we'd want it to be a really positive opportunity. And probably to do it at quite a different scale from what we did before. So I imagine there's quite a high chance of it happening at some point soon. We're just waiting for it really to make sense for our strategy, and the timing to fit in that sense.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about your grant funding. Is that something you rely on?
No. So when we relaunched, obviously we looked at, when we kind of were trying to design the future business model, looking around at all the different approaches and potential revenue streams, we were quite particular in not wanting to rely on grant funding, which is obviously a route that works for some media. But we wanted that stable operating model with consistent recurring revenue, and not having to kind of year to year or quarter to quarter be in a position of, we're going to run out of money unless we get more grants. So once we got to that point of having a financially sustainable operating model, we then started looking at, can we get any grants on top to fund particular things so that we can do more? And we did that last year, actually. So it was the first major grant we got. We were awarded by the Solutions Journalism Accelerator, which was a new fund run by the European Journalism Centre.
That sounds good.
So we got what for us was it was quite a significant amount of money for a specific editorial project. We ran a series about solutions to mental health challenges in the developing world, which was amazing for us because, being quite resource tight, we hadn't previously been able to kind of send reporters on the ground in places like Zimbabwe and have translators. And we also delivered solutions journalism training for the reporters there.
Amazing.
And then published it in print and online across, it was a year-long series. And we also managed to launch our first ever podcast off the back of that funding as well, focused on that same issue. So it was great to be able to bring that grant money in and expand what we were doing without that reliance on it.
Yeah, and a brilliant initiative as well. And do you think that that's had knock-on effects for your subscriptions, for example? Do you think people, are more inclined to buy the magazine because they listen to the podcast, for example, or how does it work for you like that? It
was really good for generating a new audience with audio and engaging our current audience, which was kind of our first goal with it, in a new way, and deepening the relationship. Because we're really focused long term on building a supporter base. So one of our key revenue streams is supporters who make a regular monthly contribution to support our journalism, and they're primarily a digital audience. So we saw the podcast as a great way to bring more value to the digital audience and to help incentivize that support. What was interesting though is that doing something like a podcast, which was a very large piece of work, whilst also trying to maintain business as usual, is challenging. And one area where it was challenging is it starts diluting the marketing message and diluting the ask. Because we've been very focused on encouraging people to subscribe to the print magazine and or to become online supporters. And then when we shift to, we did a big launch campaign for our podcast, which was great in that we got, a good number of listeners and downloads. And in terms of the metrics, it was successful. And that's a great foundation for more podcasts and building that audience. But it took the focus away from the subscriptions and support.
Yeah, so there's only so many things you can ask for at the same time. Huh? Listen to our podcast and support us and subscribe is too many messages, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so it's a balance, because there's a trade-off, because by promoting the podcast, where that could disincentivize the immediate income of subscriptions and support, which is an ask that audiences are more familiar with, so they're further down the funnel. But with a podcast, it's going to take time to build the podcast audience, to build the engagement, for them to see the value and move to the point of then supporting us off the back of the podcast itself. So there's a balance there to be worked with.
Yeah. Do you think if you did another podcast, you might do it kind of subscriber only content or something like that, so encourage people to sign up and to, so that it becomes more valuable?
We'd certainly want to try and monetize it more if we did one again. I mean, we were really, lucky to have the opportunity to have a podcast funded and well funded as well. So, we worked with a production company on it, so we could do something at really good quality, had 2 really good professional hosts on it, and had some on the ground audio. So, we launched in a really good way, but it was paid for by the grant funding. Yeah. So, in the future, we definitely, unless we had more grant funding for podcasts, we'd want it to really be able to have a clearer ROI financially. And I think we'd be looking at 2 main options for that, which would be brand sponsorship, which connects to another revenue stream we have, which I imagine you might have some questions about.
Yeah, I do.
Or, as you suggest, we'd go down the route of reader revenue. And because we want to build a supporter service long term and bring more value to that, it's highly likely that we'll be looking in the future towards how can we offer audio journalism in some form exclusively for supporters. So there'll be some kind of paywalled access potentially. So we're exploring these kind of options.
Difficult, isn't it, with grant funding? You can't exactly say, oh yeah, and 10% of this will be our profit. Thanks very much. It's like the money has to go towards the thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Tell us a little bit more about your subscriptions then. I mean, we touched on it just briefly. I know gift subscriptions are a big thing for you as well. Do you want to tell us more about that?
So a key part of how we've built print subscriptions and our subscriber base is through Christmas gift subscriptions in particular. So that's our peak income period for the year. And, it's a really great Christmas gift to be able to give someone a subscription to Positive News magazine, where you're giving them something that you've got a tangible product to give them to start with, this beautiful, certified carbon neutral magazine full of inspiring stories, which is a great thing to read at Christmas time when you don't really want to be engaged with bleak breaking news, and that it lasts for a year. And so it's something that people love giving to family members. I mean, the amount of times that for some reason it seems to be a really big thing for mums. People say, I got a gift subscription for my mum and she loves it. And that seems to be the way in for a lot of people. And then, a lot of those gift subscribers will become subscribers themselves and gift it to others.
The decline in print, have you seen that yourself in your own company, or have you, I imagine you had a rather sharp increase in subscriptions around COVID. Would that be true?
For us, print sales have grown relatively consistently, between 5 to 20% each year since we relaunched and turned what was that free newspaper into a magazine. But it's getting harder and harder. I think the cost of living is a major factor there. We found during the pandemic, people were really desperate for some balance in their news consumption. Obviously, with so much difficult news to process, it was very overwhelming for people, and we saw a huge uplift in website traffic. Awesome. And we saw an uptick in subscription levels during the pandemic, which was quite significant. And then that did drop off the year after. The year after was a more difficult year, but then they picked up again and it kind of evened out.
Interesting. I think I know for myself during COVID, my kid was 3 years old then, and I became a news avoider right at that point because I just couldn't bear to hear it anymore. I felt like I was I had my child who I was looking after, and, to hear all the horrible statistics every day and not being able to do anything about it other than clap on the street once a week felt disabling. So, do you hear that kind of thing from other people as well? Like how do people respond to positive news in that respect? Because that would be the publication again that my mum was sending me going, read this, and maybe it's a way to actually feel like it's okay to avoid the other news because this has a bit of positivity about it, and that solutions-based journalism again. Yeah,
exactly. With our approach, we're trying to legitimize this form of more solution-focused journalism with a constructive mindset. So it's very much not about distracting yourself or head in the sand. It's not happy, fluffy stories about water skiing squirrels and stuff like that. And the fact is that increasingly people are overwhelmed by the news and finding it increasingly depressing, anxiety-inducing. There's loads of evidence about the negative mental health impacts of negative news. And I think it kind of creates this background stress in our society because it's constantly triggering our stress response. And that then obviously affects how people think and view the world and interact with other people. So, what we're saying is that we need much more balance. We need a more constructive approach, which is for us is about looking at the problems from a point of view of what's being done about them. Where is progress happening? Where are the positive seeds of change? Where are the potential solutions? And then still reporting on that progress in a rigorous way with the same principles of all good journalism. It's still accurate. We're still trying to be trustworthy. We're still looking at multiple viewpoints. But it's this constructive mindset. It's asking different questions. What next? Where, not just what's gone wrong, but what's going right, what could go right. So it creates a different kind of narrative, and that narrative is more empowering for people. Research on our audience found that with this kind of approach, people feel, when they read these stories, they feel more of a sense of agency, that their choices can matter. And that's the fundamental thing for me. It's And for me, as if media is to be responsible, then we can't, although we have to report problems, we have to hold power to account. If we just leave people feeling anxious, depressed, hopeless, helpless, fearing other people more than ever, these kind of impacts, that's not actually responsible because it's not useful for society. So as well-meaning as a lot of, quality problem-focused journalism is, that approach, we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot because we're not informing our audiences in a way which is helping them to use that information, in their lives, in their work, in their communities. It's actually creating disconnection.
I'd be interested to see your demographics of not only, the kind of income of the people that are subscribing to you, but also, where they are in the country and, whether that's in local communities or whether it's more city-based. Have you looked at that before?
Yeah, so I think the commonality with our audience is it's very much people who don't want to sit back and be cynical about the world. So we find that a lot of our readers are quite community-minded and quite active. So it's people who'll be quite passionate about the causes they support, and they'll be involved in community groups, community initiatives. A lot of people working in social enterprises, for example. So I think there's that shared sense of desire for positive social change. And geographically, I think it's quite interesting that there's concentrations of readers in places like Brighton and Bristol that very much have that kind of culture, and there's a lot of community organising and very kind of active communities, as I understand it. Our largest audience is in London, within the UK, but it is spread all across the country, deep into rural areas as well.
So just to go back a little bit to the other ways that you're making money, we talked very briefly, just touched on brand partnerships. Do you want to tell us a little bit more of that? Most
of our income is direct from readers through magazine subscriptions and online support. But we also, about 15% of our operating income is from brand partnerships. So these are branded content partnerships primarily. So sponsored content published online and print, written by our journalists, but to briefs agreed with the partner and with their branding alongside, and focused on a theme relevant to the partner or their purpose. But we only work with organisations where there's a values fit with positive news. So it's a lot of B Corps, purpose-driven businesses, charities, NGOs, organisations like that. So we make sure that the branded content we produce is, it's the same quality as our independent journalism because it goes through the same process and it's written independently in terms of the actual writing of it is done by our journalists and editors, and the partner just gets a sign off on it. And that's, of course, transparent to the reader. It's very transparently marked as branded content. But we find it gets just as good engagement as the independent content because it's about the kind of things that our readers want to read about, and it's written with the same quality. So in that sense, this B2B revenue and this side of the business, it fits coherently with the rest of the model. So there's no dissonance, and it helps support the revenue model. It brings in, another stream of income that fits with the overall purpose. Because a lot of these organizations are doing the kind of things that we report on, renewable energy companies, for example. So it's, that was kind of key to how we designed it, is that we didn't want to do anything to dilute that community support, dilute the quality of the journalism, but we recognised that there was an opportunity there with these shared values that some of these other great organisations have. Yeah, of course. Have you ever been approached by a potential partner that didn't fit with your values, or is it usually pretty clear from the start that you wouldn't entertain? I imagine Shell don't hit you up for brand partnership stuff much. Yeah, they don't. I think they kind of know not to kind of knock at our door. We have had some kind of PR companies approach us on behalf of organisations, clearly not not going to work. And but usually, we attract the right kind of prospects, which works well. There's been a couple of instances where we've had conversations about the suitability of partners, and we take that to a committee on our board if there's ever any concern about the fit. But it's always worked out pretty well.
Cool. I often think that if you have to ask the question, then it's probably not going to be right anyway, right?
Yeah, I think that's often the case. At the same time, I think, our philosophy with it is we're not expecting companies to be perfect. And what we're looking for is a genuine commitment to social and environmental progress and a genuine change within themselves as an organisation in that direction. And if we can see that's authentic and there's a genuine story to be had about that, if we're reporting directly on them, then that will play in their favour. And obviously, but at the same time, they can't be directly causing any negative harms.
How big is your team?
So at the moment, there's 6 of us, and most of them are part-time in the core team. And then we work with a lot of freelancers to produce the content, freelance journalists, freelance design team. We've worked with them for years, brilliant design team, but they're contracted out. Same with our web developers. So we have this very kind of efficient, small core of the business, and then these strong relationships with regular suppliers across all aspects of what we do.
That's an incredible output for a small team. It's really cool.
It's really nice to hear you say that, and it's something we hear a lot, which makes us very proud. And I think that's a kind of testament to the approach I was talking about that we try to take, and obviously the people I have in my team who are, exceptional. But I think something that makes that possible as well is coming back to the community-focused approach is our social purpose, that because our team is very driven by that purpose. And it's very rewarding as we're delivering on that to get the kind of incredible feedback that we get from our audiences, because it means so much to them. Our journalism has such an impact. And that's very strong fuel for us to do what we do when our readers say how much it's changed their perspective on the world and how they've done things like set up businesses after reading articles in Positive News.
That's awesome.
It's sometimes quite intense stuff, like moving them from really feeling despair at the state of the world to having hope again and stuff. It's very touching. So
what incredible feedback. It must be really rewarding working for an organisation or running an organisation like that. It's really cool.
Yes, it's absolutely the best bit of all our jobs.
Thank you, Seán. It was really nice to talk to you.
Likewise, it's great to be part of the the International Magazine Centre community. It's really great seeing how it's growing and all the the great services you're providing as well. So thank you too.